Anyone who knows me knows I love music, and I take it pretty serious. I built this speaker you see here and a matching one on the other side. There's a couple subwoofers down here you can just see the tops of. With the help of a couple friends, I built those. I arranged my office so that my chair is in the prime listening spot, right in the middle of those, and I end a lot of days just listening to music. Again, I really like it, and I think God's people have always liked music and realized, and God realizes how important it is. That's why an entire book of the Bible is the hymn book of the Old Testament. I'm talking about the book of Psalms. In one sense, you could consider it the original Christian music channel. Well, I hope you like this video over a psalm, and if so, then if you do me a favor and click the thumbs up, leave a comment, I always love that, and or share it on a social media site like Facebook, that would be a huge help. Thanks a lot. We're going to look at verses 6 through 8, and just to give some context, the psalm starts off and David says about God in verse 1 there, he says, "I waited patiently for the Lord. He inclined to me and heard my cry." And it seems David had been facing some distressful situation and God brought him out of that. God rescued him from that. And then he goes down and he talks about needing rescued from a situation again, something he's facing right now. And we looked at that. Well, as he talks about what's going on in verse 12, he mentions his iniquities, his sins. And so we don't know if they played a part in the past situation or the current one, if he views them as maybe consequences, the situation, or discipline from God. Whatever it is, he brings that up. And with that in mind, we read in verses 6 through 8, "In sacrifice and offering you have not delighted," David talking to God, "but you have given me an open ear. Burnt offering and sin offering you have not required. Then I said, Behold, I have come. In the scroll of the book it is written of me. I delight to do your will, O my God. Your law is within my heart." Well, did you see a little wait a minute moment there? David says, "In sacrifice and offering you have not delighted. Burnt offering and sin offering you have not required." Well, you look earlier in the Bible, in the law of Moses, and God, through Moses, commanded, yes, when you sin, you are to offer a burnt offering or a sin offering. And he had these other fellowship offerings and things, and he says of them that they're a pleasing aroma to him. So he did delight. David says just the opposite. How do you put those two together? Well, all the commentators, when you look at this, do a little study, will refer you to 1 Samuel 15, verse 22. And there the prophet Samuel is rebuking King Saul, the king before David, because Saul had been told not to offer sacrifices until Samuel got there. And Saul, for different reasons, all disobedient to God, offered the sacrifices anyway. Well, Samuel says to him, "Has the Lord as great delight in burnt offerings and sacrifices as in obeying the voice of the Lord? Behold, to obey is better than sacrifice, and to listen than the fat of rams." So you see this idea, and it comes out. Has the Lord as great delight in these burnt offerings? Behold, to obey is better than sacrifice. It's not that the offerings are bad and God doesn't delight in them, but he doesn't delight in them if they aren't done flowing from a heart that's committed to God. You know, a true desire to please God and serve him. If you're just going through the external motions, then no, God doesn't delight in them at all. And they're making this point comparatively. God does delight in these offerings, but not when you don't have, as David says here, an open ear. Which is interesting because that has a little parallel in the Samuel passage where he says, "Has the Lord as great delight in burnt offerings and sacrifices as in obeying the voice of the Lord?" Doing what he's told you to do. And that's what David talks about. "In sacrifice and offering you have not delighted, but you have given me an open ear." Now, what's that mean? An open ear. Well, he's saying there, God, you have worked, and David has responded in a way that he's open to what God has to say. That he gets God's message. Maybe it's not that he didn't know it before, but there's times we know it and don't listen to it. You know, it's a lot like Mark 4 where Jesus says, "Whoever has ears to hear, let him hear." Oh, we've all got ears. We can hear, but we don't always hear. That's what David is saying. God, you have given me that. And that's the most important. And then when David offers sacrifices, they come from that place of sincerity and commitment. Well, just to look at these other two verses. Verse 7, then I said, behold, I have come. In the scroll of the book it is written of me. This passage is quoted in Hebrews 10, and it's applied to Jesus. And so when it says it's written of me, it seems like that's looking forward to him. But there's definitely still application. David is talking about himself in verse 8 when he says, I delight to do your will, O my God. Your law is within my heart. I delight to do your will. There's times we can do God's will and we don't delight in it. Well, David says, no, it is what I want to do. Your law is within my heart. And so it's not just the idea I know it in my mind, I do know it there, but it's in this part of me that is the seat of our commitment. You know, what I'm really focused on, my general direction in life, it's what I want to be doing. Your law is there. It is what I want to be doing and following. I delight in it. And so you have that same internal versus external only dimension that comes out in verse 6. David says, I really do want to live for you and follow you. And as important as the sacrifices are, it's more important to have this open ear that is open to what you say and committed to following through on it. You know, does God want certain external actions from us? Absolutely. There's things he tells us to do, and we need to do them, but they need to flow out of a true heart commitment. And that's how we experience fully and truly this relationship that God has always wanted. You know, what kind of relationship is it going to be if we go through all the motions, but there's no real heart there? There's no true commitment. There's no delight in serving God and worshiping him. All of that should be there, and that's what David brings out in this psalm so wonderfully.